What up, you guys? It's BBKDRAGOON. Let's talk about the new controller sensitivity options that 343 put into the December update. Over 20 of you requested this video be done, which is why I'm talking about it. I get it, the new settings, there's only 3 of them, are a bit confusing. None of them are going to revolutionize your gameplay, but they might be able to help you overcome some imperfections with your controller. Let's talk about the first setting, acceleration. So when you peg the stick, apologies to anybody who gets nauseous with spinning, we're going to spin in this video a few times. When you peg your stick to the very edge of the controller, there is an acceleration that occurs to your sensitivity, making it easier to spin a bit faster when that's pegged. When pegging means the stick is pushed all the way to the very edge. So look, acceleration is here, the default is 3. You have anywhere between setting 1 and 5, 3 being the default, as I said. The higher the setting, the faster the acceleration when the right stick is held to the edge. This is important. The higher the setting, the quicker you will reach top speed. The lower the setting, the longer it will take to reach the top speed. I want you to realize that sentence, those 2 sentences right there, come from the community post about these new settings. It does not change the top speed. Rather, it changes the amount of time it takes to get to the top speed. So once again, the higher the setting, the quicker you will reach the top acceleration speed. The lower the setting, the longer it will take to reach the top speed. You're not changing the top speed. And this is going to be a setting that really is dependent on your play style. If you are a new player, don't mess with this. Unless you have a very intentional reason to screw around with the acceleration, this is not something that your intermediate or beginner player needs to even touch. If you're an advanced player, maybe a high sense player who thinks 10 is too slow, I know there's plenty of you out there, battle rifle, I'm looking at you. Maybe try pushing this up to 5 and seeing if that helps you spin around a little bit faster. Do understand acceleration is weird in the sense that it jacks your controller sensitivity up when you peg the stick. So it's very hard to predict what that acceleration rate is without playing on it for a really long time. This is why I'm going to again say to you, unless you have a very specific reason, I wouldn't mess around with the acceleration setting too much. Now, if you're an advanced player or an intermediate player and something you do want to spend time learning and messing around with, go for it. But here again, I'm going to repeat the same tip that I gave people in the sensitivity video. Spend time getting used to it. Don't switch after a couple of games. Switch after a couple dozen games. The default setting of 3 for the aim acceleration is faster than previous Halo games. The Halo 5 beta aim acceleration was set to 2. So if you want it to feel a little bit more like the Halo 5 beta, bring it down to 2. Alright, time to talk about the inner dead zone. This is a small region around the analog stick center where it just completely ignores input. It does this to prevent drift. I don't know if you've had a controller that's had drift before, but that basically means if you leave the controller untouched, the analog stick actually thinks it's getting some movement, and it'll just kind of move the crosshair. I've known a ton of people who have controllers with drift. Drift occurs because of imperfections in the production of the controllers. I've owned 2 Xbox One controllers, neither one has had any issue with drift, and I owned 3 of the Xbox 360 controllers and never had a drift issue, but I know Sassy has had drift problems before. I know plenty of people who've had issues with drift controllers. This setting comes at a default of 12%. What you want to do is you want to set your dead zone down to 0% and test it out. If you are not touching the analog stick at all and there's no drift, great. Leave it at 0%. If there is drift, you want to slowly work up that dead zone, percentage by percentage, up until you eliminate any drift that could potentially happen. And the reason we want it as low as possible is it's going to read the maximum amount of analog stick input that it possibly can when it's at 0%. When it's cranked up to the maximum, which I think is 15%, it's going to ignore a lot of small analog stick movements because it thinks it could be drift. Does that make sense? I hope it does. It's kind of confusing, but set it at 0%. If there's no drift, leave it there. If there is drift, just slowly work it up 1 notch at a time. That way it's going to give you the most analog stick readings as possible. Finally, we have the outer dead zone setting. This is to prevent slow turn. In this day and age, it is ridiculous that slow turn still exists on Xbox controllers, but it does. Slow turn is when the controller does not read 100% peg state on the control stick. So let's say I'm pushing all the way left. The controller might only read this as like 80% left or 90% left. So it never reaches the maximum speed. I've had tons of slow turn controllers. It's been a problem in Halo for a long time. Not just Halo, but in Xbox games for a long time. Comes down to some imperfections in the production of the controllers. What we used to do with our 360 controllers is you'd open them up, you'd take a file, and you would literally file out the plastic around the analog stick ring. That way it was easier to peg the stick. I have plenty of 360 controllers that have filed out right sticks for that reason. You don't need to do that with the Xbox One controller because we can just use our outer Deadzone. Now, the recommendation from the official Halo Waypoint site is that you set it at 0% at first and then test to see if you can hit 100% pegged. That means when you go left or right or up left, up right, 100% when you bring the stick to the edges, that you are achieving the maximum speed of turning. And if you're not, you need to increase that outer dead zone percentage up. So if I peg it all the way left, I've got it set at 0%, and I'm not achieving maximum speed, I need to slowly increase that percentage up. This is more difficult to notice than the inner dead zone one. Drift is easy to see. Slow turn is harder to feel because it can be inconsistent, and it doesn't have to be just horizontal left. It could be kind of up horizontal left or maybe down horizontal right. It's harder to notice, and it's inconsistent when slow turn can happen. So this one, it's going to take more experimenting. For myself, I'm probably not going to run it at 0% because I already know the controller that I'm using right here has slow turn on the left side. So I will spend some time in a custom game trying to feel this out. But with the outer dead zone one, there's more leniency. You've got more room to work with. Don't try and worry about getting it, oh, it's not as low as my buddy's controller. Don't worry about that. Just take it into a custom game, start at 0%, test it out. It can be kind of hard to feel, and if you start feeling those slow turn things in-game, those slow turn moments is the word I was looking for, then start pushing this up a little bit. To wrap up this conversation, if all that mumbo-jumbo didn't make any sense to you, you're probably just fine leaving this stuff at the default values. If you don't want to touch any of these, just work on the inner dead zone one. That way you're getting the most reading from your analog stick as possible. Drop it to 0%. If there's no drift, great. If there's some drift, bring it up. The outer dead zone one, if you know what slow turn is and you know how to feel it and look for it, this might be helpful for you. If you don't, just probably leave this stuff on default. Thank you all for watching. I hope this was helpful. These are some tools in your arsenal to add some more customizability and more tuning to your setup, but they are in no way mandatory. If there's stuff I missed, because I'm sure there is, let me know down in the comments below. Thanks for being patient with me the last couple weeks. I've been crushed at work. I've been busy. I've been kind of tired, and I've been feeling a little bit under the weather. So, not trying to push junk videos out there just to push them out there. I hope what I bring you guys is entertaining and still helpful. All right. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful Sunday, and I'll talk with you next time.